What do you mean you can't come?
I'm on a company trip. I'm going to have a good time, so don't get in my way.
I can't believe it. He said that even though his wife's father passed away.
Hey, why didn't you tell me that my mom died?
I calmly told him. It's your fault for not answering the phone. If you're going to resent me, resent your own stupidity. My name is Sophia. I'm a 32-year-old housewife. My husband Charles and I have been married for 6 years. We met because of our jobs and got married 2 years after we started dating. I worked after we got married, but quit after a year when our son Sean was born and became a stay-at-home mom. After the birth of our son, I basically devoted myself to raising him, but when he turned 2 years old, I started working part-time to save money for future tuition and other expenses. My husband is very busy with work and rarely helps me with housework, but my mother-in-law often supports me instead. When our son was born, we started living near my parents-in-law's house, which made it easier for my mother-in-law to come. Thank you for helping me all the time, Valerie. It's fine. I'm bored anyways. My mother-in-law used to take care of my son while I was working part-time. She was really helpful when the daycare was closed and I couldn't take him there. My mother-in-law was always kind and treated me like a real daughter. My father-in-law was also a wonderful man and I loved him very much. So living near my in-laws was not a problem for me. In fact, it made me very happy. Sophia, your food is always so good. You're a better cook than I am, aren't you? No, not even close. But what is Charles doing while you're here cooking delicious meals for him? Well, he's always working late. But then again, Sean is still a little boy and at the age when he wants to play with his father, isn't he? My husband always worked overtime and often came home late at night. I used to make dinner for him, but one day he said to me, I feel bad if I don't eat your food, so I do. But if I eat too late at night, I don't feel well the next day, so you can stop cooking for me. He said he would only call me if he came home early and needed dinner, so I basically started preparing food for my son and myself. But my son is still small, so I always end up with too much food. My mother-in-law, perhaps out of concern for me, sometimes has dinner with us. If I eat with my husband all the time, I get bored. It's a lot of fun to eat with you and Sean. Isn't your husband jealous of you? Yes, he is. That's why I make up excuses sometimes. My mother-in-law laughs as she tells me this. Thanks to my mother-in-law, I don't miss my husband when he comes home late or when we don't get to eat together as often as I'd like. I lost my mother before I married my husband, so my mother-in-law was like a mother figure to me. I don't want to say this directly to my mother-in-law, but I had a good relationship with my parents-in-law like that. But circumstances can change out of the blue. One day, my father-in-law became ill and needed nursing care. My mother-in-law seemed to be very upset about this, and she had to stay with my father-in-law for a while. I often went with my son to check on my parents-in-law, and it seemed that my mother-in-law was having a hard time taking care of her husband. Valerie, aren't you tired? I'm okay. I'm sorry I haven't been able to take care of Sean. You must be busy taking care of him and working, right? You don't need to worry about that. You should think about getting some rest. And if you need me to help you with anything, please, don't hesitate to tell me. Thank you. I'm feeling better just by having you by my side. My mother-in-law tried not to show me how tired she was, but I could tell from being around her that she was still having a pretty tough time. So I asked my husband to go check on her. Your mother seems to act tough around me, and I think she's pushing herself too hard. So why don't you go see her sometimes by yourself? If it's just her own son, I'm sure she'll be able to relax. But when I told my husband this, he responded in a surprising way.
I don't think I need to go. It's too much of a hassle and there's nothing I can do. I can't do the housework, I can't take care of him, and I'd just be in the way, wouldn't I?
Did you hear what I said? I'm just saying that it would be easier on your mother if you, her son, was around her.
No, I don't think it would change anything. I'm tired from working late every night, so at least let me rest on my days off.
My husband said that and didn't go to his parents' house after all. He spent the whole time lounging on the couch at home, and when I thought he was getting ready to go out, he said he was going out with his friends. I became more and more disillusioned with my husband. I thought he was always working and didn't care much about me or our son, but when I saw him putting himself first and not showing any interest even when his own parents were going through a hard time, I thought he was a terrible person. Then my husband found out he was going to be sent out of the city for work.
It's in a rural area, but it's an urban area, so it sounds like a lot of fun. It's cheaper than LA, and I'm really looking forward to it.
I see. I was looking at my husband with a subdued eye as I rejoiced. I guess he doesn't like being nagged by me about seeing his parents and playing with his son, so he's happy to be free from those days. But to be honest, I was glad he was leaving too. I think I had come to dislike him completely. No, I don't know if it was to the point of dislike, but I thought it would be better to keep my distance from him. From then on, I lived with my son alone. I was quite happy not to have to think about my husband's dinner when he came home early sometimes, and also not to have to wash his shirts and socks and so on. Just not having that makes the housework a lot easier. So the extra time I could afford to spend there, I decided to go to my parent-in-law's house to support my mother-in-law. If I was taking care of my father-in-law, I wouldn't have much energy or time left over to do housework, so I decided to help out with the housework. Valerie, dinner is ready. Thank you. You've been a big help. Well, you've always been a great help to me. Sean and I haven't had dinner yet, so come join us. Oh, that's so nice. It's going to be lovely. My mother-in-law seemed to find it comforting that she could eat with us. She was eating with a very relaxed expression on her face. My son loves his grandparents, so he was happy to be with them. I continued to go to my parent-in-law's house to help out in various ways, but then a very unfortunate thing happened to me. My father! To my surprise, I received the news that my father had suffered a heart attack and passed away. I was at my parent-in-law's house at the time and went to the hospital immediately after explaining the situation to my mother-in-law. Dad! There was my father, covered with a white cloth. He was fine when I saw him just the other day. We had just had a nice conversation and I had promised him that I would come back to see him again. I could not accept his sudden death. But I couldn't stand around grieving. I had to prepare for the funeral. I tried my best to put my mind at ease and rushed to make the funeral arrangements, thinking that I had a long way to go before I could cry. And then I called my husband. Charles, my father passed away. The wake and funeral will start tomorrow, so could you please come home right away? I thought my husband would say he would come home right away, but he replied in a way I never expected.
I can't have that kind of thing coming out of the blue. I can't go, so I'll pass.
I couldn't believe my ears. Wait, what do you mean you can't come?
I'm on a company trip.
Company trip?
Yeah, that's right. I'm going to have a lot of fun, so don't get in my way.
I can't believe it. He said that even though his wife's father had passed away. At that moment, I heard something snap inside me. You're putting travel above family, aren't you? You've been acting like you don't care about anyone but yourself all this time.
Huh? What are you talking about? I'm the one supporting you in Sean's life. If I didn't care about you, I wouldn't be paying your bills.
It's your duty as a father to provide for Sean. Never mind. I don't want you at the funeral. Why don't you just enjoy your company trip?
What the hell? You just made me feel bad on the eve of the trip. If you don't want me to go, don't call me.
With that, he hung up the phone. I was beyond angry and disgusted. Sophia, I'm sorry. My stupid son. Valerie, did you hear that? I'm sorry. I was taking care of my husband and I had to go to the bathroom, and that's when I heard it. I can't believe he said those horrible things to you. I'm so sorry. Don't worry about it. I'm really grateful for all you've done for me. You've been very busy taking care of your husband and even Sean for me while I've been busy preparing for the funeral. I really wish Charles would come home soon, but I didn't expect much from him. Seeing me looking so unhappy, my mother-in-law seemed to have a thought. My husband and I thought we had raised him well in our own way, but looking at his attitude towards you, I'm not sure if he's been properly disciplined. I know this is not something a husband's parents would normally say, but Sophia, I wish you all the best for the rest of your life. I'm sure nothing you will do will change my stupid son's mind. There may be many obstacles, but if you want a divorce, get one. My husband and I won't say anything about it. Valerie? After my mother-in-law told me this, I decided to rethink about my husband. But first, I need to focus on my father's funeral. With my mother-in-law's support, I was able to hold the funeral and see my father off properly. After the funeral, I felt a surge of sadness and cried into my mother-in-law's chest. If it had not been for my mother-in-law, I would have gone insane. I regret my marriage to my husband, but I think that meeting my mother-in-law was a treasure for me. But life is truly cruel. 2 days after my father's funeral, my mother-in-law passed away. She was involved in a car accident. My father-in-law and I were both devastated at the news of her death because she was like a real mother to me, and the shock was so strong that I was in a state of despair for a while. Then, as I began to regain my composure, I immediately called my husband. But no matter how many times I tried to call him on his phone, I couldn't get through. Why? Why isn't he answering? I was frustrated. No matter how many times I tried to call him, he wouldn't pick up. I left voicemails, I sent numerous messages, but he never returned my calls, and my messages were never even read. But I didn't have time to wait for an answer that never came. I talked to my father-in-law and immediately proceeded with the funeral arrangements. My father-in-law is in a wheelchair, so it was up to me to make the arrangements. It was so sad that I had to do my mother-in-law's funeral when I had just finished my father's funeral a few days before. I couldn't keep up with my emotions. Still, I had to make sure my mother-in-law was well taken care of. With this in mind, I held my mother-in-law's funeral. Some of my relatives asked me, "Why didn't your husband come?" So I answered honestly, and everyone was stunned. What the hell is he doing? Going on a company trip and not being in touch when his mother dies? I heard he didn't even show up for his wife's father's funeral. Word of my husband spread through the extended family, and he was beginning to be hated by everyone. But I never felt sorry for him. I tried to contact him several times, so it was his fault for not being able to reach me. Then I learned a surprising fact. When one of my relatives heard that my husband was on a company trip, she tilted her head and said, "Hey, speaking of the company Charles is with, the company I work for is a business partner of his, though they were all there when I went to work the day before yesterday." Is that really true?
Yeah, but did you say Charles was working out of the city? Maybe it's a company trip to that branch office. Well, that was never mentioned, though.
That story led me to have other suspicions about my husband. Anyway, we managed to finish my mother-in-law's funeral, and I was sorting through her belongings with my father-in-law. When I was walking to the front door, I found my husband there. When he saw me, he stared at me with a devilish look on his face. Then he turned red in the face and yelled at me.
"Hey, why didn't you tell me that my mom died?"
That's what my husband said to me.
"It's your fault I didn't get to see my mom in her last moments. I will never forgive you."
How could my husband say such a thing so selfishly? I calmly told him, "It's your fault for not answering the phone. I called you many times. I even left voicemails, and I sent messages many times. It's your fault for not checking on them sooner. If you're going to resent me, resent your own stupidity." My husband stared at me, clenching his fist as if he didn't know what to say back to me. Finally, he found some kind of excuse and opened his mouth.
"I was on a company trip. I couldn't be the only one on my phone."
You mean the whole company was there?
Yeah, they were. All the people from the branch office were there.
That's funny. I spoke to someone at your company and they told me that the branch office you're in doesn't do company retreats. I wonder who on earth you went on that big trip with.
Oh, no, that's...
My husband choked up, perhaps panicking over the unexpected question. That response was like an answer already. "I don't think I can do this with you. Let's get a divorce."
Wait a minute. I'm not thinking divorce.
I don't care if you're not thinking about it. I'm going to get proof of your infidelity, and I'm going to get a divorce. My husband was panicking once I brought up divorce. I guess he thought he could have an affair in the comfort of his own home. But I just couldn't let him get away with that so easily. In fact, I had even made a request to a relative. It was a request to investigate an affair at the company where my husband worked. The people at the head office were willing to investigate because if they refused, there would be all sorts of trouble. And at that time, according to the information from the employees, my husband and his lover, who were getting along well with each other, were often seen together. It's disgusting that even after your mother passed away, you were seeing your lover. When I told him this, he was extremely upset.
"I'm sorry, it was just a one-time thing. It didn't mean anything."
He said that, but he confessed, so that was the end. "So you admit to the affair?"
Yeah, but I'm sorry, because now I realize that you're the only one for me.
My husband approached me saying that. I realize that you're the only one who's not for me. I'm not going to change my mind about the divorce, so get on with it and sign the divorce papers. My husband was astonished at how firm my intentions were. And in no time at all, word spread around that my husband had been having an affair and what had happened at the funeral. So my ex-husband spent his days feeling ashamed of himself and gave in to the divorce. My father-in-law has been in a nursing home since then and is now making many friends with his cheerful personality. I'm sure he was sad when my mother-in-law passed away, so I'm glad he was able to make friends like that. After that, my divorce from my husband was finalized, and I filed for alimony against my ex-husband and the adulterer. I asked for child support from my ex-husband, and he is still unable to quit his job because he owes me a lot of money, even though he is looked at coldly by all his relatives and people at his workplace. The affair was with a junior colleague at the same company, but they stopped seeing each other after this incident. Apparently, my ex-husband was getting played by this woman. Well, it doesn't matter to me anymore. Meanwhile, I started living alone with my son. We are getting along well with each other, getting government benefits for single mothers, etc., and working hard at part-time jobs myself. I was able to gradually increase my part-time work hours and eventually became a full-time employee. Since then, my life with my son has become much more comfortable. Sometimes my son and I visit the nursing home to check on my father-in-law. He seems to really enjoy our visits. My father-in-law has cut ties with my ex-husband, and he doesn't seem to know how he's doing or be interested in him after that. I don't care about that man anymore either. All I want to do now is enjoy my life with my son. I'm going to continue to live my life and work hard, thinking only of watching my son grow up.
Our 5-year-old warns her dad. The hotel you'll stay with a woman will burn. Ignoring her power, he regrets forever.
Some children possess mysterious power. These abilities can range from precognition to hearing voices in their heads. My beloved daughter is no exception. One time, as my husband was leaving for a business trip, she tearfully cried out, "Daddy, don't go! It seems like the place you're staying with the women today will catch fire." He laughed it off, wondering if she had seen it in a dream. He would later regret not believing her for the rest of his life. My name is Kathy, and I am 31 years old. I used to work as a chef in a restaurant where I met my husband Jason, who was 5 years older than me and worked as a salesperson for a food manufacturing company. And we got to know each other during meetings. We hit it off. And eventually he proposed, and we got married. I continued working for a while after getting married, but I quit my job when I gave birth. Our lovely daughter Sandra is now 5 years old. Raising her has been challenging, but she is so adorable, and every day is incredibly fulfilling. Jason, who works in sales, often comes home late, and by the time he arrives, our daughter is already asleep. In the beginning, he used to peek into her room to catch a glimpse of her sleeping face, and I would gently scold him, saying, "Don't wake her up." However, lately, he hasn't even been doing that. The most challenging period of raising kids is up until the age of 3. Although he was busy, Jason didn't help with child care even on his days off, and he would just laze around in bed. "Hey, I understand you're tired, but at least take care of her on your day off." I complained, but he brushed me off, saying, "What? I have to work even on my days off? When am I supposed to rest then?" I never got any break throughout the year, but it seemed like he adored Sandra. Although he never changed her diapers or fed her milk, he would only play with her when it suited him and buy her toys to win her affection. Despite spending more time with me, she would say, "I want to hold hands with Daddy." It sometimes annoyed me how she favored him, although he wasn't cooperative in raising her. He would occasionally take us shopping or out for dinner when he felt like it. I partly gave up, thinking, Well, maybe this is what every married couple is like. And as for our daughter Sandra, from around the age of 3, she seemed to have some mysterious power, or a slightly peculiar aspect. I'm currently pregnant with our second child, but before I knew I was pregnant, during the time when we went to the restroom together while we were out, she asked, "Mommy, is the baby in your belly a boy or girl?" A baby in my belly? Although we were trying to conceive, we hadn't been successful. I hadn't taken it too seriously. But when she mentioned it, I suddenly realized that my period was late. So I bought a pregnancy test just in case, and it indeed showed that I was pregnant. I became certain of her mysterious power on the day we planned to go to the shopping mall. Usually, she would be excited to go out, but that day she vehemently opposed, crying and yelling, "I don't want to go. No." Since she cried so much, we decided not to go. And it was a good thing we didn't. That night on the news, we learned that there had been an assault at the mall during the time we planned to go. I excitedly told my husband, "It's a good thing we didn't go. We could have gotten caught up in the accident." But he dismissed it, saying, "No way. It was just a coincidence." When we visited my in-laws during a holiday, she tearfully told her grandmother, "I see something cloudly in your chest. You should go to the hospital soon." Since she had predicted the incident before, I believed her. I explained the situation to my mother-in-law, Ellen, and suggested she have a checkup. But her response left me speechless. "How creepy! What kind of child is she? It's because of your poor parenting that she turned out like this. It's not me who should go to the hospital. It's her. Don't let her say weird things outside. It's embarrassing. People will think she's creepy." I was at a loss for words at her harsh comment. Until then, I neither liked nor disliked her, but maintained a moderate distance since she was my husband's mother. But from that moment on, I started to dislike her. Later, we found out that she indeed had breast cancer. Fortunately, it was in the early stage and could be removed through surgery. But she said things like, "You don't really think Sandra predicted it, do you? It was just a lucky guess." But I knew the truth. Normally, she would avoid health checkups. But this time, she went for a breast cancer screening, right after my daughter told her about it. She must have believed my daughter's worst. If the discovery had been delayed, it might have been too late. Although I didn't want to see Ellen during this summer break, I decided to go because my sister-in-law Lisa, who is my age, was coming home, and I was looking forward to seeing her. "Hi, Kathy. Long time no see. How are you? And how's Sandra? How's your morning sickness?" "Well, so far, it's not too bad. It was terrible when I was pregnant with Sandra." "Lisa, it's been a while. Your belly has become quite big, hasn't it?" Lisa was also married and expecting her first child. Watching our conversation with a disinterested expression was my other sister-in-law, Kelly. Kelly was like a carbon copy of Ellen. She was the oldest of the 3 siblings and still single at 38. According to Lisa, Kelly couldn't get married because she was mean-spirited, which I completely agree with. When my husband and I went to greet her for our wedding, she said to me, a stranger at the time, "Jason, are you really going to marry this girl? She looks plain, and her clothes are so unfashionable. There must be a more suitable girl for you out there." Until Ellen verbally abused my daughter, I hadn't thought of her as that malicious. But looking back, my father-in-law was always around, and so was my husband, so she must have been putting on a facade. My father-in-law, David, is a quiet person, but he is very kind. Lisa must have taken after him. She is always gentle, smiling, and bright. And since we were the same age, we got along well. I think of her as a real sister and cherish her. At my in-laws' house, they have a big dog named Sam, and my daughter is always eager to see him. She usually goes to play with Sam first, but this time she started making a fuss.
Mom, Sam is in trouble. He says his stomach hurts.
What? I hurried to check on Sam, but he wasn't crying or showing any signs of pain. This is ridiculous. She's going to grow up useless if she keeps lying like this, Ellen said, while Kelly joined her in mocking her.
Right? Kathy seems dumb, so Sandra must have taken after her.
As for Jason, he said, well, Sandra must have just had a dream or something. At that moment, my father-in-law said, no, I believe what Sandra is saying. Let's take Sam to the vet. He took Sam to the vet, even though his wife disapproved. What a waste of time! When he returned from the checkup, he excitedly said, Sandra, thank you! Sam had a stomach illness. It would have been too late if we had waited any longer. He hugged my daughter, and she looked happy. Yes, it seems that Sandra had some kind of precognitive ability, Lisa said. And we all enjoyed the conversation. But Ellen and Kelly remained unimpressed. It was around the beginning of autumn that I started to notice my husband acting strangely. He had always come home late, but his weekend work had increased.
Have you been busy lately? You've been working on weekends a lot more.
Yeah. I've been assigned as the leader of a new project. At that time, I believed him and didn't doubt his busyness, as I was aware of his demanding job as a chef. But I began to notice things, like him having flashy things, always paying attention to his phone, and going into bedroom with his phone whenever it rang, which made me increasingly suspicious. Still, I was pregnant and wanted to deny the possibility of infidelity. Meanwhile, I was busy with my daughter, prenatal checkups, and maternity yoga, and I had completely forgotten about my suspicions about Jason. Lisa gave birth during this time, so we went to celebrate and got to hold my new nephew. Sandra seemed fascinated by the baby she was seeing for the first time.
The baby in your belly is a girl.
Wow, a girl, huh? I'm so happy. You will have a little sister, Sandra. Although I didn't know the gender yet, I was confident it was a girl since she said so. Lisa also said, I wish I had asked Sandra to predict the gender too. They had told me it was a girl, but it turned out to be a boy. We laughed together. A few months before my due date, the home phone rang, and when I answered, the caller introduced herself as Anne, my husband's junior from work. She said that she was carrying my husband's child. I had almost forgotten about it, but as I recalled his suspicious actions, I felt both a sense of I knew it and anger at being deceived while pregnant. Jason probably thought that since I wasn't working and was pregnant, I couldn't divorce him and took the situation lightly. For some reason, I had a strong feeling that her pregnancy was a lie. Well, congratulations, I said excitedly, which she probably hadn't expected. Not knowing how to respond, she seemed confused as I asked. So, in other words, you want us to divorce, right? Yes.
That's inconvenient because I'm pregnant too. Can you at least wait until I give birth? You can wait that long, right? Of course. I should be the priority since I'm his wife. Perhaps finding me creepy, she quickly hung up the phone. Although I had a faint suspicion of his infidelity, I never thought the person involved would call me directly. But I saved myself the trouble and expense of hiring a private investigator to look into his affair. So I started to find the situation amusing and even funny. But what should I do now? Can I really manage on my own? After divorcing my husband when our second child is about to be born, while divorce seems inevitable, I decided to seriously consider what to do next without telling Jason about the call. Life went on as if nothing had happened, until one day my husband announced he was going on a business trip. But given his excitement and cheerful demeanor, I was convinced he was going on a romantic trip with a woman named Anne. Oh, you're working so hard. What's the business trip to? I need to know where you are, just in case something happens. And I need to get a hold of you. When I said that, his face tensed for a moment. But he composed himself, took out his smartphone from his bag, and wrote down the hotel's address. He probably wrote down the contact information from a previous actual business trip. On the day of his departure, as I handed him his bag, I said, "Take care and have a safe trip."
Sorry to leave you while you're pregnant. Please take care of Sandra. If anything happens, you can call my parents' house.
He spoke kind words to me, trying to sound convincing. At that moment, Sandra cried out to her father, who was leaving for his trip. "Daddy, don't go. It seems like the place you were staying with the woman is gonna catch fire today."
What are you talking about?
My husband asked, his face clearly flustered.
Sandra, did you have another dream?
He said, laughing it off as he patted her head. By not believing her this time, he would regret it for the rest of his life. I panicked, thinking that what she said might come true. I tried to desperately convince him not to go, but he wouldn't listen. That day, I couldn't relax and paced around the house. When I talked to David, he and Lisa came to our home. "I'm sorry, David. And you too, Lisa. Is my nephew okay? I know you were here to take it easy. Sorry for making you bring him along while you were going through so much." "No, it's fine. I'll put him to sleep here. I don't want to stay at the house with my mom and sister anymore." Kelly is sarcastic, and my mom is nagging. "Oh, speaking of my brother," I explained everything to them, and David said,
"There's no doubt that what Sandra says is true. She saved Sam that time. My idiot son is really pathetic. I want to stop him, but would he answer the phone if I called?"
He tried calling, but as I expected, Jason didn't pick up. A few hours later, the worst happened. I received a call from an unknown number, and when I answered, it was from a hospital. It wasn't a hospital near his supposed business trip location, but one in another city. They told me that Jason had been caught in a fire while he was with the woman. The apartment was probably where Annie lived. I asked Lisa to watch Sandra and went to the hospital with David. There, my husband lay in bed, his body injured and suffering from burns. Although the surgery went well, he had sustained spinal cord damage when he jumped out of the window to escape the fire. And there was a possibility he would need care due to lingering effects. I decided to tell him about the divorce once he woke up. A few hours later, when he opened his eyes, he noticed his father and me.
"Oh, Kathy and Dad, thanks for coming. There was a fire accident on my business trip. I'll need to be hospitalized for a while. Sandra's words really do come true. I'm surprised. I'll be causing trouble for a while, so please bear with me.
I was dumbfounded by his feeble words. You know, I already know. You were at your mistress's house and got caught in a fire, right? What do you mean, bear with you? I confronted him calmly. He looked frustrated for a moment, but then brazenly said,
Well, let's just forget about that. It was just a momentarily lapsed. Rather, I'll need your help from now on. You're my wife, so it's only natural that you help me, right?
That's when David, who had been listening silently, spoke up.
Don't be ridiculous, son. Do you understand what you've done? Kathy is raising Sandra while being pregnant. How dare you have an affair when things are so tough for her? I don't care about you anymore. If you want someone to take care of you, ask your mistress. What? Is that what a father would tell his son? Kathy, this was just a fling. A fling? You don't think I'm serious, do you? She won't take care of me. Let's just be happy. Just the two of us, like we used to. We have another child on the way.
Fed up with my husband's selfish words, I said, That's it. We're done. Let's get a divorce. I placed the document on the table.
Are you kidding me? Divorce? I'm in this condition. Don't whine about a one-time affair. Who do you think has been supporting you all this time?
Just as I was about to yell at him, the curtain next to us suddenly opened, and I was startled. A young woman appeared. I've been listening quietly, and you just keep saying selfish things. You just ran away from the fire without me. You said I was a better woman, and that you would divorce your wife and marry me. And now you say it was just a fling? Listening to the conversation, I knew this woman must be the mistress.
Anne, you're right. Of course, it's like that. It's just lip service for married men.
He called her Anne. No doubt the woman who had called. I had no sympathy for her, but I thought what he did to her was terrible too. She seemed to have been rescued with lighter injuries than Jason, but she looked like she could burst into tears at any moment. If her pregnancy was real, I wondered if her unborn baby was okay. Anne, how's your baby? Is everything okay? Jason looked at me, wondering why I would ask that. Don't worry, the pregnancy was a lie. He just couldn't make up his mind. I just wanted to push him to get a divorce from you.
You lying about being pregnant? You're terrible.
He yelled, but he had no right to say that. You are the one who's terrible. You said I was just a fling, right? Then there is no problem. Goodbye. As she tried to close the curtain while crying, I stopped her. Wait, Anne. I'm sorry about your injuries, but I'll be claiming compensation for emotional distress. It's only natural since you got involved with a married man. Hearing my words, she silently closed the curtain. I'll also be claiming compensation from you, Jason. I'm about to give birth, so you'd better cover the childbirth expenses as well. My husband, probably thinking he wouldn't be charged, made a dumbfounded face.
No way. You can't do that. I won't be able to work for a while,
he said, looking at me with the pleading eyes. But I felt no sympathy for him and shook my head. Then,
can you lend me some money? No way. It's your own fault. Take responsibility and pay for it. Please, Kathy. I admit I was wrong. I'll be a better man for you. So don't abandon me.
No matter how much he called out, we ignored him
and left the hospital room, returning home. After I thanked David and Lisa, they went back to their own home. Later, I received a call from my mother-in-law, who had heard about the fire and visited her son in the hospital. How could you be so heartless? He's in such a terrible state. Forgive him for just one affair and help him out. You'll be in trouble without a husband when the baby is born. Sandra is such an amazing child. Let's make use of her abilities from now on. I could hear Kelly's voice chiming in from the background.
That's right.
It made me think how selfish they both were. It's amazing that you can say such things. Especially after calling Sandra creepy. Maybe you should go to the hospital yourself, Ellen. I can't be a family with people who tell their grandchild to go to the hospital and have such crazy mind that they cheat. Sandra and the new baby will be better off without a father like him. If you want to help, why don't you help him yourself? I said at all once. She was yelling and screaming, but I ignored her and blocked her calls. Later, I was able to get a divorce from Jason through a lawyer. Since there was a lot of decisive evidence, I was able to claim a large amount of compensation from both Jason and his mistress Anne. Jason, having lost Anne's affection and being denied help from his father, had no choice but to rely on his sister and his stay-at-home mother. However, Ellen and Kelly were kicked out of the family home. Ellen, despite being a stay-at-home mom, spent money recklessly and hurled verbal abuse at Sandra and Lisa. My father-in-law couldn't stand her defending Jason and told her he wanted a divorce. Self-proclaimed career woman Kelly was actually incompetent at work, but her boasting was top-notch. She had a bad reputation at her company and apparently didn't make much money. She didn't contribute to living expenses, didn't do housework, and just lazed around, constantly making snide remarks to Lisa, so she was kicked out too. Jason, who had cheated on me with a subordinate under the guise of a business trip, was demoted at his company and didn't have anyone to visit him in the hospital. He had a large debt to pay for hospital fees, child support, and compensation. With his now disabled body requiring care, he would likely struggle in the future with his moneyless mother and sister. At least he had someone to stay with, I guess. Moreover, I heard that he had lost his function as a man due to after effects. But I couldn't find it in myself to feel any sympathy for him. I gave birth to a baby girl. My father-in-law David apologized profusely, but he was not to blame for anything. Although David and Lisa are no longer considered family by marriage, we still keep in touch and get together regularly for meals and such, so that our children could have play dates. My mother, who had been away in the custody side taking care of my grandfather, returned home saying, "Your brother and his wife are there now, so your father will be fine." She has been helping me with my daughters. My parents are absolutely smitten with their grandchildren, whom they haven't seen much. I have some savings for a while, and Jason's compensation payments will help me get by. After my baby is about 6 months old, I've arranged to start working at the restaurant again. As my older daughter Sandra grew up, her mysterious abilities gradually seemed to fade away. While I sometimes feel a little sad about that, I want to continue watching over the growth of my 2 daughters.
Cheating husband only earns $1,300 per month. He tells me no side job for housewife. I show him my salary. Lol.
Gracie, help me out. Huh? Why? Well, my wife told me that I have to pay for all our living expenses except for groceries. I overheard this conversation at the trendy restaurant where I went to have lunch with a friend. Seated nearby was a man I recognized, chatting with a woman I'd never seen before. The man was my husband. Yes, I had stumbled upon my husband's infidelity. My name is Heather, and I'm a 27-year-old part-time working housewife, married for 4 years. My husband, Isaac, is a year younger and works part-time at a restaurant as a freelancer. In college, I found him cute and didn't worry too much about him not job hunting. I naively thought that as long as I worked hard, our future would be fine, not giving it any serious thought. But after marrying him upon his graduation just because we were going out, I began to feel uneasy about his $1,300 take-home pay. At that time, I was in my second year of working and earning $1,900. We could make ends meet, but I worried about what would happen if we had a child. Before our wedding, my in-laws were very concerned about our marriage. "Are you sure you want to marry our son? You're still young. Maybe you should wait until Isaac's job situation is more stable." I didn't understand the meaning of her words at the time. Living with my parents, I never had money troubles and didn't comprehend the significance of supporting ourselves after marriage. After experiencing the challenges of marriage, I realized how naive I had been and often regretted rushing into it. In the beginning, I was determined to make our marriage work, believing I had to put in more effort. So I started a side gig working from home in addition to my regular job. Surprisingly, it suited me well, and after 3 years of marriage, I quit my full-time job to focus solely on working from home. Our lifestyle improved, and we managed to save a considerable amount. We were financially stable enough to welcome a child, but unfortunately, we still couldn't conceive. Isaac kept quitting and starting part-time jobs, so I suggested he become a full-time house husband. "Hey, I'm earning a decent amount, so you don't have to push yourself to work part-time. I want you to be a stay-at-home husband and support my work." But he made a disgusted face at my proposal. "What? You just sit in front of a computer typing all day?" "No, I'm working." "You quit your job and made me work. What do you mean you're earning?" "I'm supporting us, and if I quit my job, we won't be able to make ends meet." I didn't know what he misunderstood, but he said that. "Remember when I told you I wanted to quit my job because I could earn more working from home? I guess you didn't understand me." "What? Working from home is just pocket money. Leave the work to me, and you take care of the house." "Hey, you wouldn't say that if you know how much I make." I tried to show him my bank book, but he refused to look at it. Thinking there was no problem with him continuing to work part-time, I dropped the subject. But then he started acting strangely. I had received $700 for living expenses until now, but he stopped paying even that, and his time at home outside of his part-time job gradually decreased. One night, when he came home drunk, I complained. "You know, you also use electricity, gas, and water in this house, right? At least help with some living expenses. It's true I wanted you to become a full-time house husband, but since you decided to continue working part-time, I've been doing the housework. And because of that, I've reduced my working hours. Also, where have you been hanging out lately?" But he just glared at me, annoyed. "Shut up. I'm the head of this household. To you, I'm your master. Wear a maid outfit and welcome me home saying welcome back. You're a full-time housewife. Don't do side jobs." He yelled and fell asleep on the sofa. "Fine, if you insist, I'll focus on housework," I said, smiling at the drooling Isaac. The next day, I apologized to my clients and informed them that I wouldn't be able to continue working once I completed my current tasks. For the next few days, I focused on finishing my remaining work, and eventually, I became unemployed. Even so, we could afford to live comfortably because we had plenty of savings. I could live without working for about a year, so I didn't have any problems. When Isaac came home from his part-time job, I told him, "Isaac, I've decided to quit my side job, just like you said." He smiled a little. "Really? You finally realized I was right, huh?" "Yes, you were right." "Of course. I'm working hard every day, and I'm more important than you, who just earns a little money by playing with a computer at home." "Yes, it seems so." Although annoyed by his tone, I still handed him a cash card and a bank book with a smile. It was a newly created card, and I had already contacted each company to change the direct debit to this card. "I have a favor to ask of you, my wonderful husband." "What is it?" "It seems I'm not good at managing money. I can't make ends meet with the $700 you give me, and you didn't even give me living expenses last month or the month before." "Don't you have any savings? I didn't know you were so careless with money, Heather." "Yeah, it seems that way. That's why I want to leave it to you." "If that's the case, leave it to me. $200 a month should be enough for food expenses, right? You should be able to manage that." My strategy of appearing submissive seemed to work, and he confidently took charge of all the payments except for the $200 a month he gave me for food expenses. Of course, $200 wasn't enough for food expenses, so I covered the difference with my own savings. The first rent payment seemed to go well, but as he watched the bank account balance gradually decrease with each payment for electricity, gas, and phone bills, his face turned pale. When I casually asked, "How's the money management going, honey?" he forced a smile and replied, "It's going well, of course. I'm the best at managing our finances. If we don't have enough money, let me know. I still have some money from my side job." "I don't need to rely on such a small amount of money." "All right. Next month, the water bill will also be deducted, so be sure to let me know if you're really in trouble." "What? The water bill?" His face turned pale, but I left him with a smile. Currently, Isaac is supposed to be providing $1,100 for living expenses, excluding food, but since we've always been living frugally, there should be no problem. We chose a cheap apartment for rent, and our utility bills are just a little over $100. We have no debt, and our internet and phone bills aren't that high either. With some tight budgeting, our expenses should be around $1,000. He can use the extra $100 as pocket money. In fact, I've saved the money he has given me for living expenses until now, and I have about $20,000. If he needs more pocket money, he can either increase his part-time work or switch to a better-paying job. I think it's up to him whether or not he wants to do that. But I didn't know anything. I had no idea what he was doing behind my back. One day, I went to a trendy restaurant that was popular recently for lunch with my friend Iris. It was a popular place among women, and there were a few couples inside. We ordered the popular menu items, took some selfies, and had a fun time talking and laughing about recent events. At that moment, I heard a man's voice from another table. "Gracie, help me out." "Huh? Why?" "My wife actually told me I have to pay for all the living expenses except for food." "You're married?" "Yeah. My wife used to take care of everything around the house." "Then why don't you ask your wife to do it again?" "I can't do that. I boasted and said something stupid. She must have gotten mad at me and decided to let me handle the living expenses." I looked at the table in surprise. It was Isaac and a woman I had never seen before. The woman was a young girl in her 20s. She was just the type he would like. When I told Iris that one of the people in the couple was my husband, she became very interested and started recording their conversation on her smartphone. Was it a lie when you said you were working part-time for your dream? Huh? Oh, did I say that? But you can actually make a living on a part-time job. He was laughing foolishly, and the woman glared at him. I thought I might be okay with marrying you, but wow, you're the worst. If I were your wife, I'd definitely divorce you right away. Who else but your wife would put up with a broke, freeloading man who asks for help after spending all the money on her? Don't ever contact me again. The woman said that and stood up, quickly leaving the restaurant. Iris immediately followed her. When I looked at Isaac, he seemed to be crying with his head down. So I stood up, paid the bill at the register, and chased after Iris. When I went outside, Iris had caught up with the woman and said, "Can I talk to you for a moment?" The woman looked at her suspiciously, so I stepped in between them right away. I'm Isaac's wife. We heard your conversation with him at our table earlier, and we were wondering if we could talk to you for a moment. The woman turned pale and apologized. I'm so sorry. I didn't know he was married until just now. I understand. It's okay. We just want to talk for a bit. Iris, the woman named Gracie, and I went to a different cafe, and we decided to hear her story. It seemed that he had been cheating on me with Gracie for about half a year. She said that the reason he started acting tough towards me was probably because she praised him. I got her permission and recorded our conversation. When I first met Isaac, he was such a gentleman and would buy me anything I wanted. He would always take me to nice restaurants for meals and brag that he was making enough money from his part-time job so he wouldn't have any problems with living expenses. That's why I said things like cool, manly, and reliable and that I liked him, but it was just lip service. Iris nodded in agreement. I see. He misunderstood what was being said to him. That's why he started acting tough towards you, who didn't show him respect as a husband. Respect him as a husband? That's impossible. He only makes $1,300 a month. I've never seen him chasing his dream, and he's always complaining about not having money. He's always getting into fights with other staff and quitting. I think he's changed jobs over 20 times. He can't work in the neighborhood, so he works at a store 2 stations away. Upon hearing my story, both Iris and Gracie turned pale. How in the world did you manage to have a married life with him? Well, I'm the one who makes more money. Honestly, I'm not struggling financially. Maybe I hurt his pride as a man when I asked him to become a stay-at-home husband. But that's not a good reason for him to cheat, is it? Iris looked at me seriously and said, Of course not. I didn't say anything because I thought you two were happy together, despite Isaac being a freeloader. But if you are suffering, I have something to say. Divorce him. He doesn't care about you right now. I can't imagine you raising a child with someone like that, if you ever have one. I want you to divorce him before you have children and find someone better for you. I nodded vigorously at her words. Yeah, you're right. I've been thinking I need to work hard for him all this time. From now on, I want to work hard for myself. After that, Iris introduced me to a lawyer who was an acquaintance of her husband. The video of Isaac and Gracie arguing that Iris took, as well as the recorded testimony from Gracie, served as evidence, and the divorce preparations went smoothly. Then I brought up the subject of divorce to Isaac. "Hey, do you know a girl named Gracie?" He looked surprised for a moment, but then looked away, pretending not to know her. No, I don't know her. Who is she?" "You don't know? Could it be that you have early onset dementia or something?" You're making fun of me again? Your husband?" "Uh-huh, I am." I showed him the video of him and Gracie arguing that Iris had sent me. "You really don't remember anything about Gracie? It seems like you've been supporting her quite a bit for the past 6 months. Hey, before I took over managing the money, you had about $500 in allowance, right? But from what I hear from Gracie, it seems like you've been spending more than $500. Where did you get that money from?" When I asked, his face broke out in a cold sweat, and he stammered out an answer. Actually, I borrowed $2,000 through a cash advance." "What? You went into debt just to support her?" "Well, she said that men who spend money on her are attractive." "So what about the repayment?" "There's no problem with that. My hourly wage has gone up recently, and I'm taking home $1,400. I also switched the cash advance to a revolving payment plan so I can pay it back every month without any trouble. But when I make the payments, I'm left with only $100. I somehow managed to convince her to settle for a cheaper place the last time." As he explained with a laugh, I was left speechless and exasperated. After a deep sigh, I immediately presented him with divorce papers. "I can't believe you'd borrow money with a revolving payment plan. You're insane. But how you spend your money is no longer any of my concern. As a severance payment, I'll give you 20% of our assets. I've saved part of the money I've earned and the living expenses you've paid me. It seems pointless to ask you for alimony, so once we're divorced, never involve yourself with me again." "Huh? What are you talking about? Even if you say 20% of the assets, it's not that much, right? How can you really make demands with that kind of money? This is why women are so brazen." Since he didn't seem to understand, I showed him the reality. "It's $20,000. "What? That much? Are you lying? Saying you actually didn't have it just to disappoint me? That's not gonna work. I've figured out these past 3 months paying for my own living expenses. There's no savings in this house at all." Not wanting to talk to him any longer, I took out my bank book from my bag and showed it to him. "You didn't want to see the bank book when I tried to show it to you before. Did you not want to face the reality that I'm earning more than you? Well, too bad. I'm earning $9,600 a month. I have a total of $100K in savings." In shock, Isaac looked back and forth between the bank book and me. "Anyway, I don't want to be married to someone like you, who's irresponsible with both money and women. I don't even want to divide our assets. If we could cut ties, I'd even pay off the debt you've created. So don't ever get involved in my life again. From now on, we'll communicate through our lawyers, so don't contact me directly." With that, I picked up the luggage I had prepared earlier and left the house. When I returned to my parents' house, they greeted me warmly. After returning to their house, I started working from home again. I resumed working with the clients I had been dealing with before. At first, my income didn't increase as much, but after a while, it returned to its previous level. After that, Isaac apparently cried to his parents, but since I was offering favorable terms, we decided to proceed with an amicable divorce without any negotiations. At one point, we had a discussion with our lawyers about the division of assets, and Isaac and my in-laws came to my house. My in-laws apologized profusely, making me feel almost guilty. We agreed that the division of assets would be settled in a way that satisfied me, and I would transfer $20,000 to Isaac as a severance payment. According to my in-laws, they were afraid of giving him a large sum of money, and they thought that even $20,000 was too much. We will make Isaac pay for the debt he incurred. You don't need to pay for it, Heather. We'll also handle the cancellation fees for the apartment and the disposal of the furniture and appliances. We're truly sorry for the trouble our son has caused you. My father-in-law apologized, and it seemed that my mother-in-law had scolded Isaac quite a bit, as his face was beet red and he was looking down. Seeing him like that, I felt a bit relieved. I had been on guard, thinking that he and my in-laws might demand reconciliation after learning about my monthly income, but I'm glad that they were good people. Since then, Isaac has been forced to work at his relative's company, living and working there. His debt was only about $2,000, so I think he could pay it back quickly, but he seems to be working like a horse without being able to go out freely. This is probably a good lesson for him, who had always been spoiled and dependent on me. I can only pray that he becomes a decent member of society. As for me, I continue to meet up with Iris and have lunch together. This time, as a token of my gratitude, I gave her a travel voucher. Then she said she wanted to go with me and made travel plans for us. I wanted you to travel with your family. Of course, I'll go with my family too. But you're my best friend, so it's okay to prioritize you, right? She said that with a big smile. I consider myself fortunate to have become friends with her. I want to continue to cherish such a best friend in the future.
Husband abandons dementia. Afflicted father, leaving divorce papers and embarking on cheating trip. The consequences of my seeking retribution?
Take care of my dad. You also want to be with dad, right?
This is what my husband told me. He left the house after leaving these words behind. I'm Isabel, 35 years old, and I'm a housewife. I have been married to my husband Lynn, who is 8 years older than me, for 10 years. We don't have any children. Before getting married, I worked as a receptionist at a major company. My husband was also an employee at that company. Sometimes the receptionists were invited to the company's employee gatherings, and that's where I met my husband.
Isabel, this is the first time we're talking, isn't it? I work on the 8th floor. Did you know that?
By chance, we ended up sitting next to each other, and true to his sales profession, he was skilled at conversation and quite entertaining. During the gathering, he made me laugh a lot. As we talked, I found myself drawn to him. I thought that if I were with this person, we could live a life filled with laughter. Later, I heard that my husband had seen me when I was working as a receptionist and had been interested in me from the start. A week later, the two of us went out for drinks and started dating. During our relationship, wherever we went, we were always laughing. After 3 years of dating, we decided to get married. At his request, I became a housewife and quit my job as a receptionist. During the first few years of marriage, every day was enjoyable, and I was incredibly happy. I looked forward to my husband coming home, and it was a daily joy to eat the meals I cooked together and listen to my husband's stories.
When I eat your cooking, Isabel, all the fatigue from the day just disappears. Thank you so much always.
I had a very good relationship with both of my in-laws. My mother-in-law is kind and easygoing, and I have never experienced the stereotype mother-in-law mistreatment. She is a housewife with more experience than me and is excellent at cooking, so she often taught me. My father-in-law Kenny is a person who is good at talking, cheerful, and funny, just like my husband. He was intelligent and held a high position as an executive in his company. When we talked about our marriage life, we were envied by our friends because everything seems to be going smoothly for us. However, recently my husband has been going on frequent business trips, and he always comes home late. Since his promotion, he had become busier than before, which was one factor. Additionally, it had become more frequent for him to come home after I had already gone to bed. We had almost lost the opportunity to have dinner together, and he had stopped making me laugh. One day, my mother-in-law passed away. Her pre-existing lung condition suddenly worsened. My father-in-law did his best to support her during the 6 months she was hospitalized. The two of them had a very close relationship. In the late hours on the day of the funeral, I saw my usually cheerful father-in-law silently crying in front of the mother-in-law's photo, and I couldn't stop my tears. Since my mother-in-law passed away, my father-in-law lost his energy. He was retired and living alone, so I worried about him, and I made it a habit to call him occasionally. I repeatedly told my husband that we should go visit him on our days off, but he declined, saying he was too busy. One day, my brother-in-law and his wife, who lived near my in-laws' house, came to our home.
I haven't told my brother about this until now, but something is off with Dad. I initially thought it was just because he hasn't been the same since Mom passed away, but his forgetfulness has become unusually severe. When I went to the hospital yesterday, he was diagnosed with dementia and certified as requiring care. Since we were worried about him living alone, we are considering living together with Dad. However, we both work, so we can't be with him 24/7. I wonder if there is any way you could help us occasionally?
I couldn't believe what my brother-in-law was saying. I knew that my father-in-law wasn't feeling well, but I had never realized that he had dementia just from our phone conversations. As I was about to offer my help, my husband spoke up first.
No, we're going to live with Dad. Don't worry about it. I'm the oldest son. Isabel is a housewife. So she can with him all the time. I will help too. Let's take care of that together. Isabel, is that okay with you?
I was caught off guard by how quickly the conversation had escalated, so I hadn't quite organized my thoughts yet. I have never had experience with caregiving. While I might be able to help occasionally, I wondered if I would be able to be there constantly by his side. I had many concerns, but deep down, I had prepared myself for the possibility that one day, as the wife of the oldest son, such a day would come. Above all, I wanted to be of assistance to my father-in-law, who had taken care of me all this time. So I made the decision to live together. I would be fine. After all, I have received a lot of help from Kenny all this time. After giving that response, a few weeks later, my father-in-law started living with us.
I apologize for any inconvenience. If I ever say something foolish, feel free to get angry at me.
That's what my father-in-law said to us. We made the decision to live together, but caregiving turned out to be more challenging than we had imagined. My husband is rarely home, leaving me alone with my father-in-law. His symptoms are still mild, and he recognizes us properly. However, he often buys the same items repeatedly and frequently misplaces his keys and wallet. There are good days and bad days, but when he goes out, he tends to come back having lost something, so I accompany him whenever possible. My father-in-law, perhaps feeling guilty for constantly needing my assistance, sometimes seizes the opportunity when I'm busy with housework to go out alone. When he returns safely without losing anything, I feel relieved. However, when we went shopping together yesterday, he bought eggs again, not realizing that he had already bought them before. After that, for the following 3 days, he went out alone, and each time he bought eggs again. It made me realize that from now on, I absolutely had to accompany him. My husband comes home late every day, often after my father-in-law has already gone to bed. Since we started living together, his business trips have increased even more. He doesn't ask about my father-in-law's well-being or engage in conversation. I have many stories about my father-in-law that I want my husband to listen to. But whenever I try to talk to him about it, when he comes home, he always makes excuses like being tired and doesn't listen at all. The fact that he doesn't even listen to me was quite stressful for me. Even when he is occasionally off and at home, he doesn't make much effort to interact with my father-in-law. There are even times when he ignores my father-in-law when he tries to start a conversation. One day, while I was hanging up the laundry,
Dad has gone out.
Despite my expressed desire not to let him go out alone, my husband casually informed me without any intention of helping. He had no intention of assisting me at all, and I was dumbfounded. One day, my husband, who was always late getting home, came home in the evening. I had been feeling stressed by my husband, but I was happy that he came home early. However, when he returned,
I suddenly need to go on a long-term business trip starting from tomorrow, so I have to prepare.
He began packing his belongings into a large suitcase.
Where are you going on the business trip? How long will you be gone?
My father-in-law asked, but my husband didn't answer and continued with his preparations. Judging by the amount of luggage, it seemed like he would be away for more than a week, possibly even traveling abroad. While he was getting ready, my father-in-law fell asleep. As I was washing the dishes, my husband finished his preparation, came out of the shower, and sat at the dining table.
Once you're done, Isabel, come and sit as well.
I was called by my husband. He might be absent for a while starting from tomorrow, but I was somewhat happy at the thought of being able to have a leisurely conversation with my husband after a long time. However, my husband started saying something unbelievable.
I want a divorce. I've been having an affair. The other person also had a spouse, but they finally broke up. So let's separate too. I'm going to marry that woman. Starting tomorrow, it won't be a business trip. We'll go on a trip to celebrate our separation.
I thought it was a bad joke when I saw him continue to talk nonchalantly and unintelligibly. Huh? You were joking, right? Stop it. This isn't like you. It's not funny, I said. And then,
No, I wouldn't joke about something like this. I've fallen in love with someone other than you. Please sign this and send it back to me.
and my husband continued in a detached manner and handed me a divorce papers. Once I realized it wasn't a joke, I became flustered. Since when had he been having an affair? My husband has a busy job, often coming home late and going on frequent business trips. I never questioned it at all. Perhaps all those reasons were just lies to meet his affair partner. I felt angry at myself for not noticing anything at all. During the time I was taking care of his dad, he might have been enjoying himself with his affair partner. With that thought, tears started flowing. Don't joke around. I can't just forgive something like that. What about Kenny? I shouted at my husband while crying.
I will still rely on you to take care of that. Dad loves you more than me, right? You seem happy when you're with Dad, don't you? Even if I'm not here, you won't be lonely with Dad around, right? I will at least provide the minimum living expenses. I'm asking you.
My husband completely ignored all of my emotions and said with a refreshed expression,
Wouldn't you be fine with your father-in-law around? I will provide the living expenses.
Did he think that saying would make me agree? I was so enraged that I couldn't control myself. Please stop saying stupid things. If I divorce you, Kenny won't be family anymore, right? I have no obligation to take care of him. My husband suggested that we take care of his father, but he never lifted a finger to help and left everything to me. I do love my father-in-law, of course. However, caregiving felt like a daily battle. I kept crying and screaming at my husband, remembering the difficult days we went through. Don't you dare joke about it. You have no idea about the difficulties of caregiving. Seeing me upset, my husband said,
Calm down. It's already decided, so crying won't change anything. We can't talk in this state. Let's discuss it again tomorrow.
And with that, he went to the bedroom. I kept shouting at my husband as he headed towards the bedroom, but he didn't even look back. It had been years since I cried this much. Even after my husband was gone, I continued to cry for a while. I realized I had cried myself to exhaustion and ended up falling asleep on the sofa. When I woke up, it was 5 in the morning. By then, my husband was no longer in the house. On the dining table, there was a divorce document and a note.
Please sign it and send it. Take care of Dad. Thank you for everything. Goodbye.
That was written on the note. I couldn't understand the meaning, and I cried out again. Then, my father-in-law woke up and was surprised to see me crying.
Isabel, what's wrong? What happened?
Please take a look at this. I showed the note and divorce papers to my father-in-law and told him everything that happened last night. As he listened, my father-in-law also shed tears. He loved my mother-in-law deeply. He had never even considered the thought of infidelity. And there was a time when my father-in-law and I talked about how we couldn't forgive someone who cheats while watching a drama. It might have been a shock for my father-in-law to learn that his own son was doing such a thing. And after listening to the whole story, my father-in-law began to speak to me slowly.
Isabel, I'm incredibly grateful to you. More than words can express. I cannot forgive him. I don't want to let it end like this. Would you let me handle it?
As I looked at my father-in-law speaking, His eyes were filled with honesty. It felt like his usual self, as if his dementia had been cured.
First, gather solid evidence of their infidelity and find out where they are. Hire a private detective for that.
Upon hearing my father-in-law's words, I felt a strong sense of support. I couldn't keep crying. I had to fight back. Following my father-in-law's advice, I left the house and headed to the detective agency. I'm not sure how many days they will be on their trip, but they should be back soon as they have work commitments, I informed the detective. A few days later, I received a call from the detective. They provided me with numerous photos of my husband walking with the other woman and entering a house together, along with information about his whereabouts. The other woman appeared to be around 25 years old and seems to be unemployed. I was surprised by the significant age difference and couldn't help but feel disgusted by my husband's actions. When I returned home and reported the finding to my father-in-law, he said,
Well done. I'm going to go there now. You will be fine on your own. Isabel, you must be tired, so have a rest.
With those words, my father-in-law headed towards the house where my husband was apparently living with his affair partner. It was a weekday afternoon, and my husband wasn't at work. When my father-in-law arrived at the house, the woman came out.
Nice to meet you. I'm the father, and I came to see my son. I have dementia, and my previous daughter-in-law used to take care of me. From now on, I'll be taken care of by his new wife, right? I would like to set a date for the move.
At first, the woman greeted my father-in-law with a friendly smile. However, when she heard the words dementia and caregiving, she responded by saying, Who are you? I have nothing to do with this, and sent him away. When my father-in-law returned home, he told me to contact my husband's workplace next. Excuse me, I'm his wife. My husband said he's going to see his mistress and hasn't come back yet. Is he at work? I told the woman on the phone in a blunt manner. I'm sorry, Lynn is currently out of the office. Would you like me to have him call you back? I was told. Please do. I told her and hung up. I was very nervous, but my father-in-law, who was listening next to me, praised me after the call ended. And a few hours later, my husband called. As soon as I answered the phone,
What the hell are you thinking? Calling my workplace? Are you out of your mind? You should have called my cell phone instead. I've already given you the divorce papers. We are getting divorced, so there's no cheating or anything, he said. Because of you, it seems like there are rumors circulating in the office. I heard it from one of the office workers with a smug look on their face. Don't mess around.
It seems like our plan was a great success. Upon hearing the panicked words of my husband, I deliberately maintained a calm tone and responded, Oh, wasn't it goodbye? I know we were getting divorced. I'm fine with you not contacting me. With that, I hung up the phone. Even this response was instructed by my father-in-law. My husband, in a state of panic, looked quite ridiculous, and I and my father-in-law shared a laugh. And that night, my husband returned home. My father-in-law was already asleep. After I hung up the phone, and he kept calling multiple times, I thought he still had something to say. But as soon as he returned, he apologized at the entrance.
I made a regrettable mistake in a moment of confusion. You haven't filed for divorce, right? Please stay with me after all. Please continue to take care of me from now on. Thank you.
I couldn't help but burst out laughing. He had shrunk so much that it was hard to believe he had been so confident until the evening. So the other person hadn't separated from her husband, right? She seemed surprised to hear that your father has dementia. So what? We are still getting a divorce. My husband has a surprised expression upon hearing my words.
You? How do you know about that?
Kenny spoke with that woman. Oh, it was also Kenny's idea to call the company. I've already found a lawyer, so let's meet at the courthouse. I'm going to demand a substantial amount of compensation. Take care. Well then, goodbye. As I said that, my husband had an unbelievably shocked expression on his face. I proceeded to kick my husband out of the house right then and there. I felt a great sense of relief. While taking a shower, I couldn't help but laugh repeatedly as I recalled the sight of my husband's kneeling. The next morning, when I informed my father-in-law, who had just woken up, that my husband had returned.
If you had woken me up, I would have shouted at him too,
he told me, laughing. While we were having that conversation, my brother-in-law arrived. It seems like my father-in-law had called him.
I apologize for my brother's rude behavior.
He apologized to me.
We will take care of that at our home. I understand that you will face difficulties with upcoming trial, but I will do my best to support you as much as possible.
My father-in-law also conveyed to me.
I apologize once again for my son's actions. Perhaps I have raised him incorrectly. You have a very kind woman. Please, find happiness.
He said this and firmly grabs my hand. I can't forgive my husband, and I no longer love him. But I have nothing but gratitude towards my in-laws aside from my husband. I truly felt fortunate to have met these people. Subsequently, the trial took place, and the photos obtained by the detective became decisive evidence, allowing me to successfully claim compensation. When I informed my father-in-law and brother-in-law about the divorce being finalized, they were extremely happy. It seems that my father-in-law, who takes medication, has mild cognitive impairment that hasn't worsened, and my brother-in-law is also relieved. I heard from the lawyer that my husband is also being sued by the cheating partner's spouse. I heard that my husband had a hard time at work because of the phone call I made and ended up quitting his job. Although I'm worried about whether I will receive proper compensation, I felt like he had been punished. As for myself, I started working as a housekeeper. I visit the homes of elderly people who live alone and assist with household chores. Being a full-time housewife for many years and not having worked for 10 years, I was very anxious about whether I could work properly. However, thanks to my in-laws, I'm very skilled in the household chores and can also provide some caregiving assistance. It's a perfect job for me, and it's going quite well. Moments when I receive thanks from the families I visit as a housekeeper makes me incredibly happy. Despite everything that has happened,